Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about from the weekend at Talladega. The superspeedway took super to a new level on Sunday with a NASCAR Cup Series playoff race that was history-making, including a super crash, as in the biggest ever recorded at the circuit, and a super finish, as in one of the closest ever finishes in the history of the 2.66-mile track. But that was the Cup race. A lot happened before that. Let's go back to Friday and the Truck Series race. I have to mention how on every truck race broadcast on FS1, I am reminded why I appreciate NBC's coverage. Listen, I know the Peacock isn't perfect, like their ridiculous apps which repeatedly require me to re-authenticate them every time I watch something. It happened again this weekend. But Fox is next level bad when it comes to their production. And this weekend, I present you two examples, starting with the single biggest fundamental no-no in journalism, and that's misspelling someone's name. Take a look at how they spelled Connor Zilich's name. I mean, there are so many ways to verify this, and they just refuse to do it. I'm guessing they left it to some intern who's never even heard of Zilich. But then the Fox broadcast reminded me of the more common reason their coverage is so maddening to fans. And that occurred late in the day when, surprise, surprise, they missed a crash. The best part is they were focused right where the crash was about to start on the front row, and once Nick Sanchez started sliding and was about to create chaos, the cameras cut away. It was so very Fox of them. Staying with the Truck Series, I was listening to the reigning champ Ben Rhodes and his number 99 team radio after he started on the outside of the front row. And things got ugly early when officials ruled that the two-time champion had jumped the start. Moments later, after serving his pass-through penalty, the driver strongly disagreed with the ruling and offered his explanation of what happened.
That's bullshit. I got hit by the 9 in the restart zone. It looked like we fucking took off, and I gave the spot back.
The driver's team didn't even have a chance to respond to his comments on the race start because they had more bad news to deliver from the sanctioning body.
Blend line violation, got to come again, got to exit off of 2.
Receiving 2 penalties in the first 4 laps of the race wasn't a great way to start, but nothing the veteran driver wouldn't be able to overcome with basically the entire race remaining. However, it only got worse for the 27-year-old when driving back in the pack, he was caught up in a crash late in stage 2 that damaged his truck and ended his day. Some days you're the windshield, some days you're the bug. On Saturday, Cup drivers qualified for the race and also met with the media. While Denny Hamlin didn't talk in depth about the 2311 and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit against NASCAR due to legal reasons, there was one question asked of Hamlin by the Athletic's Jordan Bianchi that I wanted to highlight. Watch this.
Your team has invested a lot of money, charters, building, personnel, et cetera, et cetera. With all the commitment that you've made on the financial end, do you feel like those contributions and that investment is appreciated enough by the other side?
Probably not.
Interesting pause there. 10 seconds it took him to answer that question. Someone who was willing to talk about the lawsuit was Richard Childress. Take a listen to what he had to say about it.
But I will say that the part about we got our DocuSign that evening at 6:37 is when it came in, and we had to sign it by 12 o'clock or we'd lose our charters. I didn't have a choice because we had to sign. I got over 400 employees, OEM contracts with sponsors, and I got to take care of my team.
Moving away from the lawsuit to a conversation with Kyle Larson, where Jeff Gluck asked him about driver salaries.
And yeah, I think we're probably one of the only sports, if not the only sport, that athlete salary has gone down in the last, couple decades. Where I think you look at yearly, most athletes' salaries and stuff are going up. Not just athletes, but coaches, staff members, everybody in the sport. So, yeah, obviously, we would love to see it trend upward instead of the opposite, which it's been. But I think with that, the teams probably have to, make a lot more money to make it viable to pay the people that are working for the organization.
I hadn't really heard definitively about drivers' salaries decreasing, but it would make sense with the reduction in sponsorship through the years. But hearing Larson say that also made me think back to Hamlin's delayed response to the question asked by Gluck's coworker, Bianchi. Both drivers sharing their honest and not so flattering thoughts on NASCAR. Interestingly, the drivers were just getting started. Moving on to the race, and Michael McDowell started from the pole for the 6th time this year. Yeah, 6th, which is even more remarkable when you think about the fact that he hadn't ever earned a pole in his Cup career before this season. The number 34 car led the first 13 laps of the race until the first caution of the day, when Daniel Suarez got caught by the field and unsuccessfully tried to blend in front of BJ McLeod. Also early in that first stage, Denny Hamlin fans had to start wondering if their driver was taking a similar approach to what happened at Atlanta, when he dropped back in the first few laps. However, it turns out it wasn't planned, as evidenced by what he had to say on his team radio.
Well, that sucks.
That first stage was highlighted by 4 wide racing, and I'm not talking a lap or two. I'm talking these guys were doing it lap after lap after lap. And I know personally I can take for granted how good these guys are because we watch them do incredible things on a regular basis. But when it was happening, I did not take it for granted. Watching them go around that track 4 wide around 190 miles per hour. It was really a spectacle to see. Unsurprisingly, the radios of multiple drivers included conversations about feeling uncomfortable with the situation, and several of them opted to back off and pull out, including Martin Truex Jr. and Chase Elliott. Another interesting conversation late in that first stage was on the number 6 radio of Brad Keselowski, who was not happy with how the blue ovals were working together.
Control the raceway to all the Chevys. Just like that. Smart guys. Real smart.
Ironically, at the end of the stage, Keselowski's RFK Racing driver Chris Buescher won the stage and was the lone Ford inside the top 5. He was followed by Ricky Stenhouse Jr., William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell. During the stage break, Kyle Busch's team radio took an interesting turn when the team spotter Derek Nealon didn't hide his frustration with the superspeedway racing and what it's become. A fuel savings game where drivers are racing hard or holding back depending on their fuel strategy.
I mean, I'm just frustrated. It's like I might as well just retire from cup spotting at restrictor plate races and just stick to the truck and Xfinity stuff, because I don't know when we could race. I don't know when we need to ride. It fucking sucks. If people could just, I don't care if it's 6 people talking to me, just somebody keep letting me know when we can actually race and when we're not racing.
I'll let you know, bud. Doing good.
Oh, I know. I'm not mad at any of you guys. Like I said, it's just between NASCAR and the OEM screwing this whole deal up. We just don't race. It's terrible.
In that second stage, it was a sight to see Corey LaJoie and Cody Ware leading the pack. Things got interesting around the halfway point of the stage during the first round of green flag pit cycles. That's when Martin Truex Jr. gave us yet another example of his "I'm ready to retire" mentality when he came in too hot to pit road, locked up his tires, and went for a spin. On the last lap of the second stage, reigning Cup champion Ryan Blaney was involved in a crash that ended his day, and he didn't hide his frustration with Alex Bowman for starting it.
Go ahead and take the 48 for me. I'll appreciate it. I will. As soon as we get parked.
For fans of the number 12, it's been a rough last month and a half, as he suffered 4 DNFs in the last 7 races. He's had a total of 7 DNFs already this year, for the most ever in his career. That crash, which included a scary scene with Ross Chastain being assisted out of his smoke-filled car, also involved playoff drivers Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin. Austin Cindric won the stage and was followed by Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, Shane Van Gisbergen, and William Byron. In that third and final stage, the drivers once again treated fans to a 4-wide display. This time around, all I could think was, were those changes NASCAR implemented this week on the roof allowing this to happen? With around 20 laps to go, the teams began jockeying for position to try and get into the bottom lane for a final stop on pit road. I have to admit it was confusing with so many teams pitting together and then returning to the track and blending in. You really didn't know who was where on the board until all the green flag pit stops had concluded. Once everything shook out, Stenhouse and Cindric led the front row and were followed by cars in their respective OEM alliances. Elliott, Byron, and Larson trailed Stenhouse on the outside, while the number 2 was followed by blue ovals driven by Keselowski, Logano, and Burton on the inside. On his stop, Ty Gibbs didn't blend back in with anyone and was riding alone. Take a listen to him describing it all on his team radio.
Okay. How do I look at her, though?
Sweet. All by yourself right there.
With 5 laps to go and tension rising, it finally happened. Not the big one, the massive one. Massive as in 28 cars involved in the biggest crash in Talladega history. Moments after NASCAR put out the red flag for the cleanup, Chase Elliott shared his thoughts on the matter.
This is honestly comical that we've created this right here. Yeah, understood.
Is everybody just sitting back there in their car waiting to get moved?
Yeah, everybody's just spinning their wheels, turning in circles, can't go anywhere, stuck in the grass, stuck on the asphalt.
But the number 9 team wasn't alone. There was so much confusion on who was getting towed and who wasn't. At one point, a tow truck was pushing Elliott and then stopped, and he wasn't happy about it.
These fuckers are not going to push me anymore.
Ultimately, Elliott and Chase Briscoe received tows back to pit road, and many fans were questioning why they received that treatment while others didn't. Unsurprisingly, after last week when Josh Berry didn't receive a tow at Kansas, the number 4 crew chief Rodney Childers offered his opinion on the topic. It's honestly exactly what I expected, not the least bit surprised. Kyle Busch's team not happy with the racing, Chase Elliott describing the comical product after the big crash, and Childers adding fuel to the fire. Lots of folks weren't happy at Talladega. Add Denny Hamlin to the mix, and his source of frustration was interesting because it was his own 2311 racing driver, Bubba Wallace. And what happened on that final lap when instead of sticking to the tail of the number 11 after crossing the start-finish line, the number 23 jumped up into the outside line that started to move forward after Kyle Busch moved up to the outside trying to form a third lane. Unfortunately for Rowdy, no one followed. When the cars took the checkered flag, Wallace finished 9th while Hamlin finished 1 spot behind. Here's what Hamlin had to say about the situation.
Damn it, the fucking 23 fucking had the bottom lane rolling and he pulled out.
Yeah. Everybody's own agenda, man. You know how it is. We hire y'all to be selfish and then ask you not to be. That's hard.
However, one team was pleased, and that was the number 47 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. after he won the race and became yet another playoff spoiler. I know Stenhouse gets a lot of grief for causing wrecks, but I put him right at the top when it comes to superspeedway racing. His numbers bear that out with 4 career wins, 2 each at Daytona and Talladega. But I want to point out what I feel was the race-winning move by the JTG Doherty car, and it came with 5 laps to go in that moment that produced so much carnage. Look at what happened to the number 47 when Cindric slammed into his side. You know Stenhouse was death gripping the wheel and held it straight, but I would venture to guess that you put some other drivers in that same situation and the car goes into the wall and is yet another casualty in that massive pileup. So I want to give Stenhouse some props for that control specifically and holding on to the victory. And the last thing I want to talk about from the race is that finish and the margin of victory. Stenhouse edged Brad Keselowski by 6/1000ths of a second. That goes down as the 3rd closest finish in Dega history behind only Jimmy Johnson's win over Clint Bowyer in 2011, which was 2/1000ths of a second, and Dale Earnhardt narrowly beating Ernie Irvan in 1993 by 5/1000ths of a second. For those keeping count, Talladega was the 4th race in 2024 that ended with one of the top 10 closest finishes in the 76-year history of the sport. Think about that. 76 years, and this year we've had 4 of the closest finishes. It started at the Daytona 500, which was also 6/1000ths of a second, and includes Atlanta at 3/1000ths, and of course the closest ever at Kansas at 1/1000th of a second. The Gen 7 car may get criticized from the drivers, crew chiefs, and some fans, but it's hard to argue with the entertaining and exciting results. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this week's episode. I want to hear what you thought about it. First, let's go back to Saturday's media availabilities, and I want to hear what you thought about Kyle Larson's remarks on drivers' salaries and what Richard Childress had to say about why he signed the charter agreement with NASCAR. As for the race, I want to hear what you thought of the 4-wide racing, the massive crash, and what Chase Elliott and others had to say about it. And finally, let me know what you think about so many close finishes in 2024. And finally, one last order of business, and I'm going to announce the winner of the Cancun hat from last week's video, and it is Stephen Nolman 4534. Stephen, please reply to this video so we can get you your hat sent. Thanks again everyone for watching this video and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.